A metal lift shoots upward through darkness. It slams to a stop. Voices come from above, and then light floods in as the top opens. A boy named Gally reaches down and shoves the passenger out onto the ground. A crowd of young men circles around him. The newcomer scrambles to his feet and runs. He doesn't get far. He trips and hits the ground. And when he looks up, he sees massive stone walls surrounding him on every side. There is no way out. The boys grab him and lock him up, but a young man named Albie steps in and lets him go. Albie asks the newcomer who he is. The boy has no answer. He can't remember anything. Albie tells him that's normal. Everyone who arrives here wakes up the same way. No memories, no name, nothing. Albie walks him through the place. It's called the Glade. The boys living here are called Gladers. They grow their own food, build their own shelters, and keep things running on their own. Once a month, a lift they call the Box comes up from below. It brings supplies and one new person. Nobody knows who sends it. Albie introduces him to Newt, his second in command. As they walk, the newcomer notices a gap in the stone walls. Albie shuts that down immediately. Going beyond the walls is against the rules. Later, a younger boy named Chuck helps the newcomer find a place to sleep. When the newcomer walks toward the open wall gap, Chuck tells him he can't go there. Just then, two boys named Minho and Ben come jogging out from inside the walls. Chuck explains that only the runners are allowed in there. The newcomer watches with interest, but before he can ask more questions, Gally shoves him aside. The other boys crowd around as the newcomer looks rattled. Then something shifts inside the walls. Something large moves, and the stone doors grind shut for the night. That evening, Newt sits with the newcomer and explains the setup. The runners go into the maze every day and map what they find. They've been doing it for 3 years trying to find a way out. The maze changes every night, the walls shifting and rearranging. Newt says only the strongest and fastest boys earn the right to run it, and nobody who gets caught inside after dark has ever made it back alive. The reason is the Grievers, creatures that live inside the maze and kill anyone they find at night. That night, Thomas sleeps and sees flashes, doctors, a lab, and the face of a young woman he doesn't recognize. The next morning, Albie takes Thomas for a walk. He tells him the Glade wasn't always this organized. Boys died in the early days because of fear and chaos, so they built rules and structure to keep everyone alive. Albie then takes him to a wall covered in carved names. Some are the names of boys who died. Thomas picks up a tool and carves his own name into the stone. Later, Thomas works the fields with the other Gladers. He asks around about ways to escape, throwing out ideas. Each one has already been tried. Nothing has worked. Thomas wanders toward the woods on the edge of the glade. Just then, a figure crashes into him from the trees. It's Ben, one of the runners. Ben grabs Thomas by the throat and accuses him of doing something to them all. Thomas grabs a bone from the ground and cracks Ben across the head to break free. He runs back to the glade. Newt appears and swings a shovel into Ben's face to stop him. The boys hold Ben down and pull up his shirt. There's a wound on his body, swollen and infected. Albie says Ben was stung by a Griever. The sting causes something called the changing. Albie asks Thomas what Ben said to him. Thomas tells him Ben said everything is Thomas' fault. Near nightfall, the Gladers carry out the punishment. They force Ben back toward the maze doors. Ben fights and claws to stay inside the glade as the stone walls slowly grind shut. The boys push him through. The doors close. Ben is gone. That night, Thomas dreams again. He sees a laboratory. A scientist speaks to him, saying that wicked is good. Then the young woman's face appears again. She tells him everything is going to change. Thomas wakes up the next morning and sees Minho and Albie heading into the maze. This is unusual. Albie is not a runner. Newt explains that Albie probably went in to find the exact spot where Ben was stung. Newt tells Thomas to trust Albie. He was the first one to arrive in the glade and has kept everyone alive since. The Gladers wait near the doors all day. As the sun drops, the stone walls begin to close. And that's when they see them, Minho carrying Albie, both of them still far from the entrance. The Gladers scream at Minho to drop Albie and run. Minho keeps moving, but he's not going to make it in time. Thomas runs. He dives through the gap just before the doors seal shut behind him. He's inside the maze. He reaches Minho and checks on Albie. Albie has been stung. From deep inside the maze, the Grievers start to wail. The walls begin to grind and shift. Minho stands up and says they need to go, without Albie. Thomas refuses to leave him. The two of them lift Albie and carry him through the moving corridors. But the Grievers are getting close and hanging nearby. They hoist Albie up into the vines to hide him. Then Minho spots a Griever moving toward them. He panics and runs, leaving Thomas alone. Thomas struggles to keep Albie suspended in the vines. He tucks himself into the wall and stays still. A Griever passes directly below him, massive mechanical legs scraping the stone floor. It doesn't see him. When it moves on, Thomas ties the vines to secure Albie in place. But the Griever comes back. Thomas backs away slowly. His foot lands in a patch of slime. He looks up. The Griever is above him, dropping down fast. Thomas sprints. The Griever gives chase, and Thomas hits a dead end. He has nowhere to go. With the Griever lunging at him, Thomas grabs a hanging vine and pulls himself up onto one of the lower walls. Minho comes back. The two of them spot a wall that's still moving and closing nearby. They sprint toward it. Thomas hangs back just long enough to let the Griever get close. Then he slips through the narrowing gap, and the wall seals shut behind him, crushing the Griever against the stone. The next morning, the maze doors open. The Gladers gathered at the entrance stand in silence.
Then they see Thomas and Minho walking out, carrying Albie. Minho tells everyone that Thomas killed a griever. At the council hall, Gally lays out the problem. Thomas broke the number 1 rule. He went into the maze. It doesn't matter that he saved Minho and Albie. Rules are rules. Gally says Thomas should be punished. Minho says Thomas should be made a runner. And then, without warning, something activates the box out of schedule. The metal platform grinds upward on its own. She has a note in her hand that reads, "She's the last one." Her eyes open, she gasps Thomas' name, then she passes out. Newt asks Thomas if he knows her. Thomas says no. The Gladers are unsettled. If this girl is the last one, the box may never send them supplies again. Thomas says they need to go back into the maze. He points out that they've never killed a griever before, and they should use this chance to learn more about what they're dealing with. Minho agrees. He rounds up a group, and they head back to where the griever went down the night before. They drag out the creature's leg. It comes apart, and Minho reaches inside the hollow flesh and pulls out a small device. It has the number 7 on it and the label WCKD. They bring it back to the glade. Thomas says everyone they need to act on this and figure out how to get out. Gally pushes back. He says Thomas is a rule breaker and should be punished, not listened to. Newt steps in and makes the call. Thomas spends 1 night in the pit as punishment, but he's officially made a runner. Minho brings Thomas to the runner's cabin and shows him their maps. The maze has been fully charted, all 8 sections, but there's no exit anywhere. Minho says Albie kept this hidden from the rest of Gladers to keep morale up. Now Minho says there's something new. The maze opens each section in a specific repeating pattern. Section 7 was opened the night Thomas was inside, the same section the dead griever came from.
Meanwhile, the girl wakes up. She's climbed the watchtower and starts throwing rocks down at the Gladers below. Thomas gets her to stop and climbs up after her. He finds her at the top holding a knife. Thomas talks her down. She says her name is Teresa. When Thomas gives his name, she says she doesn't remember him. Later, the two of them talk. Teresa recalls fragments, being in water, being watched by people, a woman's voice saying wicked is good. Thomas says he had the same kinds of dreams and had seen her face in them. Neither of them has memories beyond their names, unlike the other Gladers. Teresa then pulls 2 syringes from her pocket. They have the WCKD label on them. Thomas figures the WCKD stands for wicked. That evening, Thomas proposes using one of the syringes on Albie. Albie fights back when they try. Teresa injects him while the others hold him still. Albie goes unconscious immediately. Gally escorts Thomas to the pit. On the way, Thomas asks Gally why he hates him so much. Gally says that since Thomas showed up, things have been falling apart. Thomas sits in the pit. Chuck comes by and brings him food. Chuck pulls out a small carved toy and says he thinks it might be from his parents, though he's not certain. He gives it to Thomas and says he hopes Thomas can find his parents and return it to them when they escape. Thomas hands it back to Chuck. He tells Chuck to hold on to him himself, so he can give it to his own parents once they're all out. At sunrise the next day, Minho and Thomas head into Section 7. It's open again, and it's not scheduled to be. Inside, they find large metal structures the runners call blades, and a pile of Ben's discarded clothes. The device from the griever starts beeping. They follow it through the corridors, and the beeping speeds up as they go deeper. They reach a dead end. The beeping stops, and the number on the device screen turns green. Without warning, the wall in front of them splits apart. A hidden path opens up. They walk through and reach a dark tunnel. A red light sweeps over them, scanning them. Something moves in the shadows nearby. The two of them run. Back out in the maze, the blades start shifting and moving. More walls rise from the ground, closing off the section. Minho and Thomas make it through a gap just before it seals shut. They return to the glade and tell the others what they found. Minho says the tunnel is likely where the grievers come from during the day. Gally says they'd be walking into a trap. Dozens of grievers could be waiting inside. Thomas and Gally argue. Just then, Teresa calls out that Albie is awake. They go to check on him. Thomas tells Albie they found a way out. Albie says they won't let them leave. He tells Thomas that he was always their favorite. He remembers everything now. But before he says more, noise breaks out across the glade. The maze doors aren't closing. Instead, they're all opening, every door at once. Grievers pour into the glade. Boys scatter in every direction. Thomas and a few others take cover in the fields, but one boy is grabbed and dragged off. Thomas pulls the group toward the village. Gally leads a separate group into the box. The grievers tear through the camp. They destroy shelters and kill Gladers one by one. One griever blocks the path ahead. Teresa hurls a lit lantern at it. It burns but keeps coming. Albie collapses. Thomas plants himself between Albie and the approaching griever. At that exact moment, Newt and a group of boys launch spears at the creature and pull everyone into the council hall. The Gladers go silent inside. The griever crawls over the building. It punches through the roof and snatches one of the boys. Then it grabs Chuck. Thomas and Minho hold on to him. Albie grabs a weapon and hacks at the griever's arm until it breaks loose and pulls away. But another griever seizes Albie. Thomas grabs onto him. Albie looks at Thomas and tells him to get the others out. Then the griever takes Albie. The grievers withdraw. The glade goes quiet. Gally walks in and punches Thomas in the face. He tells everyone that Albie said Thomas was one of the people who put them all in the glade. Some of the Gladers believe it. Thomas reaches down and picks up the stinger that Albie had hacked off the griever. He drives it into his own leg and collapses. Thomas goes under. He sees a facility from when they were all younger. He sees the Gladers suspended in tanks being monitored by scientists. He sees faces he recognizes. When he comes back, he and Teresa are locked in the pit together. Newt comes and explains that Gally has taken control. Anyone who doesn't side with Gally will be sent into the maze with Thomas. Thomas tells them what he now remembers. The glade is a test. It started when they were children. They were experimented on, and the group was reduced over time. Thomas also says that he and Teresa used to work for the people who built the glade. He doesn't know why they were eventually sent in with the others. Newt tells him that doesn't matter anymore. He says Thomas needs to finish what he started. Albie died. That can't be for nothing. The Gladers come for Thomas and Teresa. A few of them hesitate. They ask out loud whether Thomas might actually be able to get them all out. Gally shuts it down. He says they're not going to risk their lives. But Gally has no intention of simply banishing them. He reveals the plan. He's going to offer Thomas and Teresa to the grievers. Teresa gets tied to a post. When the others move to hoist Thomas up, he fights back. Minho, Newt, and Chuck jump in and hold off Gally's people. Thomas tells the rest of the Gladers they have a choice. He says he'd rather take his chances in the maze than spend the rest of his life locked in the glade. Some of them cross over to his side. Thomas extends the offer to Gally, too. Gally doesn't move. He just tells them good luck. The group enters the maze and Thomas leads them straight to Section 7. A griever attacks on the path. The Gladers drive spears into it, but one boy gets thrown over the edge. Teresa slashes at the griever and accidentally knocks the device out of Chuck's hand. Chuck jumps for it and grabs it, but then another griever comes climbing up from below. The others drag it off the edge. Two more appear. Chuck and Teresa break off to open the tunnel door while the rest hold the grievers back. At the end of the tunnel, Teresa reaches a security panel. She asks Thomas for the code. Thomas turns to Minho, and before Minho can answer, a griever lands on him. Another Glader stabs it in the face. The walls on both sides of the tunnel slam shot, crushing the grievers inside. A door in the tunnel opens. The survivors walk through. They move through a corridor and find a room full of dead scientists. Then they reach a surveillance room. Monitors on the wall show live feeds of the glade. Thomas finds a video queued up and plays it. A woman on screen identifies herself as Dr. Ava Page, Director of Operations for the World Catastrophe Kill Zone Department. She tells the viewer they've completed the maze trials. She explains what happened to the world. The sun scorched the earth. Billions died from heat and starvation. Then a virus called the flare spread through the survivors, driving them rabid. But the younger generation turned out to be immune. So WCKD placed them in the glade to monitor their brain activity under extreme conditions, searching for a cure. In the video, soldiers start breaking into the room behind her. She says not everyone agreed with the methods, but that the work was for the greater good. Thomas walks into the next room and finds Ava's body on the floor. Another door opens ahead. Nobody moves, and then Gally steps out from the shadows. He's been stung. His eyes are unfocused. He points again at Thomas and says they belong to the maze. He pulls the trigger. Chuck throws himself in front of Thomas. Minho drives a spear into Gally. Gally goes down. Chuck slides to the ground. He presses the small carved toy into Thomas's hand and thanks him for giving him a chance. Then Chuck dies. Armed people flood into the room. They drag the survivors outside. Thomas steps into open air for the first time. A vast desert stretches out around the maze. They're loaded into a helicopter. The people tell them they're safe now. The helicopter rises and the maze shrinks below them. Back inside, Ava Page stands in a room with other WCKD personnel. She wipes fake blood from her forehead. She tells them the maze trial was a success. Phase 2 can begin. So, what did you think about this story? Tell me in the comments. And if you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like and subscribe to Movie Capsule Recap. See you in the next video.